Hi, and welcome to a small, medium, at large podcast. I'm your host, Gail Hyson, bringing you intimate interviews beyond normal boundaries. I want to thank my son Richard and my daughter Nancy for producing and posting our podcast. I want to thank them for putting it on the social media sites such as Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and all other subscribing uh, places that we post our shows. I want to thank our listeners for contacting us with their wonderful comments. I want to thank them for subscribing. We keep moving up and up. We're going to be on this will be our 90th show or 90 something show. So, very excited for the 3 years that we've been bringing you all these interesting guests from all over the world. Let me tell you a little bit about our guest today. I want to first thank Sean Rubin, a friend and fellow uh, psychologist, not fellow to me, but to Athena and other people, who connected me to our special guest. Dr. Athena A. Drews is a licensed child psychologist and clinical parapsychologist. She is a volunteer consultant to the Rhine Research Center and the Parapsychological Foundation, responding to inquiries on children's psychic experiences. She is also on the advisory board of the Rhine Center. Dr. Drews is a professional member of the Parapsychological Association. Her involvement in parapsychology began as a research assistant at the Dream Lab, which was a division of parapsychology and psychophysics at Maimonides Medical Center in Brooklyn, New York, assisting with the dream telepathy experiments with Dr. Stanley Krippner and Charles Honorton. Dr. Drews has been in the field of parapsychology for over 45 years. She has conducted research, written articles and reviews, presented on children and their exceptional experiences, and ran psychic experience groups for adults and children. Dr. Drews is the senior author, with Dr. Sally A. Drucker, of the reference work Parapsychological Research with Children, an annotated bibliography. She has been featured on the CBS production Psychic Children and on Paranormal State. She has had past life memories and psychic exceptional experiences as a child and throughout her life to the present. Dr. Drews has an informational website, perceptivechildren.org, to help parents and children understand their experiences. She also has a forum there where the mission of the Perceptive Children Support Forum is to offer information, validation, and networking in support of children with psychic experiences or abilities. I want to repeat the site and I'm going to spell it out for you, so grab your pencils. It is perceptivechildren.org, PerceptiveChildren.org. So let's welcome Dr. Athena Drews here today. Hi, Athena. Welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
It's just a pleasure. I loved your website and reading all these things, but I'm going to start as I always do with all my guests, and here it's truly applying, which is to tell us, did anything in your childhood experiences or any story you'd like to share, did it affect you that later on in life as an adult you decided to do the work that you do today?
Absolutely. Thanks for asking. As a child, I had a lot of memories of past life, two particular past life experiences of being a man, in each of them. Um, had precognitive dreams, but the most profound experience I think that shaped my life and gave me direction to do this work and work with children was around 10 years of age or so, 9 years. I was reading a book. Actually, it was the story Ben-Hur. It dates me. They had a movie that was coming out. My family was going to go see it in about 2 weeks, and I wanted to finish the book. Had maybe 6 or 7 pages left, and I had the light on, and my mother's yelling at me to go to bed and turn the light off. And I said, "No, I want to finish the book." And she had my older brother come in and turn the light off. Well, I remember going to sleep. I was so angry because I really wanted to finish the book. Well, that night I had a dream.
Mm,
And I would dream and remember them in the morning, but this one it had a very different feel to the dream, a different kind of sense to it. In the dream, I was outside my body, looking down, and I could see that my that there was an accident, that my mother was being wheeled in on a flatbed stretcher that I didn't know at the time was called a gurney, coming in, and I knew that she was hurt. And I saw my brother, my younger of two older brothers, my brother Nick, sitting in a wheelchair, but I knew in the dream he wasn't hurt. And so I'm looking at the scene playing out from above. So
mm,
when I woke up, it stayed with me. It was very different, very profound, and I learned over time those are my precognitive dreams, as opposed to just, nighttime imagery that we create our own stories with. Well, about 2 weeks later, sure enough, we go to the movie. It was pouring rain, and coming back, we were in a car crash, and my
mm,
mother was hurt. I remember sitting in the back seat, being kind of dazed, watching what was going on. And sure enough, as we went inside, eventually my mother was being wheeled in on the gurney, flatbed gurney. My brother Nick was sitting in a wheelchair, but he was not hurt. And I remember saying to my father, Dad, I dreamt those exact scenes 2 weeks ago. And he looked at me and he said, Don't ever tell anyone.
mm,
And I never asked further, but it had that ominous feel of like, does that mean like people are going to think I'm a witch? Did I cause it because I was so angry at my mother for turning the light off? Could I have made that happen? How
mm.
could dreams come true? You know? Um, so I kept it to myself and had many precognitive dreams after, and I was very selective on who I would say anything to because the wrong people would look at me like I'm a witch or look at me like I'm going to put a hex on them or I had these powers. It led me to, exploring books. I'd go into a bookstore and I'd say, I really want to find a book about how I can understand this. And I remember around 16 or so, a book literally falling from the shelf in front of me. And it was about parapsychology, and it had a lot of answers, about Louisa Rhine and the research at the Rhine Center and the field of parapsychology. Um, Interestingly, at 18, I was dating someone who worked at Maimonides Hospital. And unbeknownst, until an article was in a local paper in New York City, I lived in New York City at the time, was a spread about the Dream Lab at Maimonides Medical Center. I said, I've got to call them up. So I called them up and I said, I'd like to come down and see what you're doing and help out. And I remember it was kind of a snowy day, a snowstorm, and I went there and they were doing dream telepathy experiments. And I was invited to stay and help run the experiment overnight.
Wow.
And so in one room you had someone sleeping and all hooked up to the equipment, and in the other room was the equipment that would register when they would have a rapid eye movement, which meant they were having a dream. When that occurred, the experimenter, often my job, was to buzz someone in a third room who had 5 envelopes, and they selected one of them and would look at it. And they would look at that picture and try to mentally send it to the person sleeping. And every time they were in rapid eye movement, that's the same picture that they would try to send for the entire evening, which we did not know what it was. After the dream ended, you could see that on the equipment, the EEGs or that I was monitoring. I'd wake the person, ask them to tell me what they were dreaming, and we would record it and have that written record of what their dream was. And this went on throughout the night. And of course, as you get closer to the morning, you have more dreams. We often have a real burst of dreaming, which is why we sometimes remember more in the morning from the dreaming. And then we would line up the pictures and read this transcript to the person and say, which of these five pictures do you think fit what you were dreaming? And then we independently would send all the transcripts and the pictures to independent reviewers who then scored it, and the results were quite significant.
Hmm.
And you could see the bits and pieces of that picture showing up in the dream of the person throughout the night. Well, I was hooked. And that became, it's like kindred spirits. I found my home. I had people who understood me, who weren't going to think I was crazy, who weren't going to tell me, don't ever talk about this stuff, that I didn't cause the accident, but what precognition is and all the other ESP components, because I was having telepathic experiences, precognition, clairvoyant, past life memories, the whole gamut as I was growing up. And it helped me understand all of that by being at that lab with Stanley Krippner, who your podcast members have heard,
Yeah,
became a dear
wonderful man.
friend. And then Charles Honorton came to the lab and was running it. And I was very good friends with him. And I stayed as an assistant there, working full time in other jobs for many years. And one year I said, is anyone doing work with children? And, I want to be able to help them feel validated. They're not crazy. This is part of life. We all have this ability. And Sally Ann Drucker was doing some research and we connected. So we started to do research together on using M&Ms and looking at children's abilities. So, a long story, pretty much my own personal experiences and some of the negative reactions of those around formed my path and my passion to help children and families and parents and teenagers not feel different, crazy, how to work with their abilities, how to understand, how to respond to them.
So I have a question here. Maybe it's two questions. When we go back to the time of your dream, did you ever tell your mother, or was it only your father and he said, don't tell anybody? So did you ever share it with her at that time, or did you share it later in life? Or,
I don't think I shared it with her per se. She was in the hospital like 4 or 5 months. She had a broken pelvis
oh,
and
oh.
she had a cast up to her chest area at that time, and they didn't do hip replacements and stuff. And so the first time I saw her, I broke out into crying, and they didn't let me see her after that. I don't know if it upset her or they didn't want me to be upset. They wouldn't let me see her. So I don't think I ever wanted to upset her or to tell her. But growing up, she did believe if you told your dreams before breakfast, they would come true.
So she did have some, because I'm curious, because sometimes some of the parents I find have had these experiences themselves, but when they hear the child having it, they don't want to tell them about theirs. They want everything like shut down, like this did not happen. So and I'm just curious because in some environments of the guests I've had, their parents were very supportive. And then in other environments, it was exactly the opposite,
Right.
non-supportive.
Yeah.
The person still came out with their gifts and things. It didn't, but their family backgrounds, you know, I find when you get support, it's more validating to be in those
Yes.
situations when you have the families where they want you to keep quiet and hide it all. I think it's a lot harder on the child in that situation.
Absolutely. It's almost traumatizing because you start to wonder what's wrong with me. And, some parents are very religious, so it goes against their religious beliefs. They think they have a demon in them or talking to demons. They may be frightened of their abilities, you know. So a lot of children and have kept it to themselves. There was one dissertation that was done on talking with adults who on their past life, not past life, but their early experiences that they had either seen spirits or religious figures. And some had never, ever told anyone until 50s and 60s of age, for that reason, that just, that they didn't want to be thought of as crazy. And
Mm-hmm.
and that, is one reason, I'm working a lot with the medical mental health field, psychologists and professionals, that when a child says something in therapy about a past life or seeing a spirit, not to be running to a psychiatrist to medicate them or to do a psychiatric evaluation or hospitalize them. They're not crazy. Let's first step back and think of the possibilities here.
Exactly. And don't they often label them as schizophrenic
Yes,
or bipolar because they think that because they're doing two realms, they think that they're actually that there's something medically wrong with it
yes,
when they're not.
yes,
I
yeah,
know myself as a child that when I was 12 or 13, I was in a therapist's office and I was being given all these questionnaires and I answered them honestly. And that put me in they wanted me on Stelazine and all kind of weird psychotic drugs. And there was nothing wrong with me. I was truly
yes,
seeing and hearing these things. But to
yes,
them, that was not possible. And
right,
I feel like a lot of children or that are in maybe mental institutions or in certain situations where it was not handled with properly and they end up being drugged for so many years that I think they probably lose a part of themselves because they're
yeah,
not let to feel or connect with that place. So
yes,
people like you are helping save these children from ending up with these terrible diagnoses that aren't exactly appropriate. I mean, there's some conditions where of course it's needed and a child needs to be, if they're going to hurt themselves or do certain things, there's a time where medical intervention is proper. But I'd say a lot of the time in these situations, they're not being understood.
absolutely. And there's been some research where people in institutions, were surveyed, and in some ways the experiences have tripped them into not being able to handle and deal with their experiences. But on the other hand, sometimes psychosis or mental illness can also open the door to psychic abilities
Mhm.
and the psychic realm. So they kind of, there's a bridge on both ways on it. But then, yeah, you get medicated and you become zombie-like, and all your feelings are subdued, and
Right, you have your like a blob, which leads
yeah.
me to this next question that I've asked a lot. And you've had so much experience in interviewing and hearing the stories of so many. What do you feel childhood trauma plays in the development of psychic gifts or abilities?
Well, I think that, and research shows that when you have that, you're on the cusp of two worlds in a sense,
Mhm.
like emotionally or even meditatively, you're going into a meditation where you're starting to fall asleep. A trauma can open the door to different states, emotional, physiological, mental states. And I think you become more susceptible, more open to those kinds of experiences. And those, in the same way, sometimes those experiences can become traumatic as well because the child or teen doesn't know or understand them and how to deal with them and how to, you know, um, navigate them, especially when it becomes the spirit world,
Mhm.
when they have contact and they feel overwhelmed by it. Often puberty can trigger psychic abilities, or open the door to that. So trauma, any kind of altered state, alternative states that people are going through, uh, can trigger it. And sometimes in a traumatic experience, uh, the veil opens. I believe we have guardian angels around us. And so sometimes you have, intercessions that happen during those experiences where the child may be saved or helped or protected by some entity. So those events can occur and come forward.
Yes. From what my experience is, I've spoken with many people who've had, like a regular, normal, happy childhood, and they may be clairvoyant or a medium, or they have, whatever different abilities. But I found that many of the people who've had traumatic childhoods have been open more to because they find a friend in a spirit, or they find because they're locked up somewhere, or their parent is abusing them, or the things that happen to them, somehow the universe presents them with a spiritual guide or angel or someone to help them along because they're in such a difficult situation. Uh,
Yeah.
so I found that to be also quite a common thing to kind of have psychic things with people who've had, childhood trauma that they had to work through, alone while they're going through the traumas. Uh,
Hmm.
I'm wondering also about when we talk about, because for me and for you, I'm seeing that we both had childhood experiences as well as teenage experiences
And adulthood.
and adult and on into adulthood.
Right.
So
Never ending.
do you find that, are children, teenagers, adults, are any of them more psychic or more in tune, or do you find that it just grows with them, or what's your experience with that?
Well, I honestly feel like children are much more, you know, in a sense, psychic, because they're open to it. Especially younger children before they even go into school are
Mhm.
open to those possibilities. They have their imagination. They create things, but they're not yet, tainted by the worldview or, by society of what you can believe or not believe. And so that becomes a dilemma for them when they enter school. That's where a lot of crises can occur, where the kids start to tell things to their peers in school or a teacher, or oh, Miss Jones, you have somebody standing behind you that looks like this, and the teacher's looking, there's no one there. It's like, what's with this kid? And they become made fun of or, reported for evaluations. And then they start to realize, I can't talk about this. I have to shut it down. I have to keep quiet about it. Or the parents try to help them navigate it by saying, you can talk about it at home, but don't bring it up in school. They don't understand, or church, or, religious areas. Um, what I find is, and some of the research seems to indicate is it does go underground for a period of time, as they get more immersed in society, or maybe, learning that they have to hold these abilities back. So sometimes it'll ebb and flow. The abilities may diminish a bit. Um, but they also evolve come puberty, where there's a physiological hormonal changes. A lot of teens start to have more experiences or a reemergence or different experiences. It'll get stronger for them. Their abilities will get stronger, or other areas, as for myself too, will come forward. Things that you hadn't experienced before. Like for myself, I see animal spirits. Then I did not want to see human spirits because I didn't want to turn around and see somebody standing behind me. I said, no, I'm not open to that, but
Right.
animals I'm open to. So I would see animal spirits. I was very thankful for that. So as you get older, it can change in form, intensity. Children might see orbs, and then it turns into maybe shapes or shadows. And then closer to adolescence, they may see full forms or have communication. So I think it stays with us all our life. Um, it depends on how open you are to them. You can shut it down, and sometimes it will ebb and flow. But I find children, especially younger children, are a lot more open to it, and we'll talk about it more because, they haven't been told not to unless they
Shut down.
start getting that message from it. I always use the analogy with people that we can all play the piano. Some of us could care less. We don't want to go there. We don't want to learn it. Some of us will just bang on the keys and it'll sound terrible and not really go far. Others are born virtuosos. They can, like Mozart, play symphonies. And most of us have to work at it and be open to it and put some energy into it. Well, it's the same thing with psychic ability or exceptional experiences. We all have that ability. It's all in us.
That's
We
right.
all can tune into that and open that side of us, but not everybody wants to. Some are afraid, some could care less about it, don't want to believe it. It shakes their world too much. And others are born very gifted and right from childhood on up. And most of us will have those experiences if we're willing to listen and be open to them.
I I want to share two things that I had spoke to my friend Dean Radin about. And one was he was talking about an experiment they were doing where they were trying to find people who had not ever had an experience. And he said it was really actually hard to find that group because even when people aren't interested, when they have a death in the family or an accident like you saw, or some sort of high intensity thing, they will feel it and know it before it happens or know this, but they may not want to admit that that's what they experience. But
Right.
when being asked to be in an experiment, people had to search and say, well, did you never have anything ever? And it was very hard for him to gather that many people that have had nothing happen, which proves to us, of course, that of course everybody has these abilities. And the other question I had asked him, he answered for me, which was, I said, so why am I like this? Why do these things happen to me? And he explained it in such a simple, perfect way for me that I got it, which is that as an adult, I don't have as many filters as normally you would have because I was spared certain things that would have given me those filters, like religion or a lot of education or these kind of things that put up, oh, this is a should or this is a shouldn't. And so, not having those, he said, it's easier for information to float in because you don't have these filters coming up saying, oh no, oh no. So, that was a great image for me. And I see of it almost
Yeah.
like slides in front of me like this. And after that, I felt very comfortable that this is how I am and it's okay. And that's the reason why. So it just felt good. And I also find that there's a commonness sometimes where in the families that are open about this and willing to share, they will say, oh, great Aunt Ida was like this, or
Hmm.
your grandmother used to speak to, while she was in Russia or wherever, she was considered the town fortune teller, or things like this that you'll find out from families that, there is some kind of possible genetic inheritance of some of these gifts.
Absolutely, absolutely. And
So,
like you're saying, in terms of filters, which is, absolutely during the daytime, but our filters lessen at night. And that's usually why people can have precognitive dreams or telepathic dreams or, because the filter that is keeping all of this information out around us that we have to kind of get through life and do our daily stuff
mhm.
is less in our sleep. And so the Dream Lab experiments showed that even just sending that information to a person is picked up. The brain is receiving that information all the time. We're just filtering it out.
Were you working there during the time when they did the experiments with the Grateful Dead concerts in New York?
Yeah, and there's some LSD stuff, and there was the immersion tanks with the Gansfeld
Oh,
and
I
the witch's cradle, also to induce all these altered states.
I don't know anything about that. What's the witch's cradle?
Well, it's like it's sort of like a sitting, sometimes you have them where you could just like a wicker type of seat, but
Mhm.
it can spin, and they would like try to create an altered state in the individual who is sitting in it. A lot like in the Gansfeld. Are you familiar with the Gansfeld
I've done it.
experiments?
Yeah, it was written up in a book about one I did.
Yeah. So
Telepathy experiment. Yeah.
So the goal is to take away all stimulation, where you're immersed in a water tank and you have quiet and, white noise and you're visually, you have little ping pong balls on your eyes
Yeah,
so
the
so
ping
that you
pong
don't
the
see
tank,
anything,
yes.
Right. So that the filters basically just start to disappear and open you up even more into into your internal ability to tune in and to receive.
I
So
thought it was a fascinating experiment. I really enjoyed that one. Um, so I have some more questions here about
sure.
your, before I move on to some other things, I wanted to see if there was one or two, depending what you feel is right, of a children's ability story that you could talk about that was exceptional, where someone came to you and because I'm sure you've done or seen, met with hundreds or maybe thousands of different instances. Are there any that in your 45 years that, oh yes, the one with the girl named Anne, I'll never forget, or something like that?
Well, the ones that stand out are the ones that are, where the child, helped save the family, where, they were, one in particular, his child was on the autism spectrum, and the family was on a boat, like a ferry boat type of thing, a sightseeing boat, and the child was not very verbal, and she kept pushing the family away from where they were standing, and there seemed to be no apparent reason for that. And she was insistent. She just kept pushing them and pushing them, and they could like, is this a what's the reason for this? It almost they felt like being kind of oppositional in some ways, not wanting to stand and just look at the sightseeing, be part of the tour or whatever it was. Well, finally, they kind of like exasperated and they followed and they moved away. And a projectile from the boat, unbeknownst to them, something had gotten loose and flew right in their direction and would have hit the family and hurt them, might have knocked them overboard had they stayed there. And it just like kind of came out of nowhere and zoomed by and, hit the water. I don't remember exactly what the nature of it was, but it was very profound. And so the family was very, concerned, like, oh my God, here's a child that you wouldn't expect to be very in tune to their environment or verbal was very in tune and very much had saved them. So those kinds of experiences often get reported to me about children reporting things that may be life-saving or, affecting the family. Others are, a child coming into a therapy session and, setting up in their play a scenario of seeing their grandmother's ghost in spirit. And, um, you know, in the session, repeatedly doing that. And so I was very much sensitive to that and had materials in the therapy room, excuse me, that allow children, to open up and share those experiences. I have an angel puppet and wizards and little coffins and tombstones and skeletons and, things that would deal with death or ghosts. And, she repeatedly would set that up. And so, I said, sometimes children can see things that other people can't see. And
Right?
gee, I wonder if you've ever seen that. She says, yeah, my grandma comes to me. And I said, oh, tell me about that. And she would tell me that the grandmother would come to her at night and kind of tuck her into bed and would kind of be soothing to her when she was scared at night because sometimes she'd see other things in the dark that frightened her. Um, and and I said, well, I wonder if mommy or daddy know anything about that. And she said, well, no, I don't want to tell them that I'm afraid they're going to be mad at me or, you know. Um, and so I asked the father, I said, did you have any deaths in your family recently? He said, yeah, my mom passed away about 4 or 5 months ago. And I said, well, tell me about the relationship with your daughter. Oh, they're very close. She used to tuck her in, read stories to her. I said, oh, well, what's your view about afterlife and what happens to us? Well, I sort of maybe believe there's a heaven. I don't know. Maybe you just disappear. I said, well, there are people who are able to have that communication. I'd be able to sense that person around them. And so I'm like easing into it, sort of sharing my view, but at the same time, I don't want to jeopardize my professionalism either. Um, and he was a little bit open to it. I said, "Well, what would you say if your daughter was able to have communication with your grandma, with your mom?" He said, well, she's always been a very sensitive child. She's always been in tune to other people's feelings, or if
Mhm.
we've gone somewhere, she doesn't want to go into, it turns out that that might have been a cemetery at one time or a hospital at one time. And I said, well, let me have her talk with you in the session. Would you come in rather than reveal it? And she was able to share with the dad her experience and he was open to it. So that was a very it made me feel good that I helped her transition into being able to share it and not to feel crazy and for him to be open to her experiences.
That's a beautiful job you're doing, and takes a lot of skill to handle those things properly. Which brings me up to one thing. I don't know if we can take a couple sentences on this because I've only been hearing about it from Sean Rubin recently, but that they're discovering incredible work with autistic children being very, very psychic. And I don't know that that's been, I don't know if that's a very new thing or if they've always thought this all along. But I have to say, from being around a couple of children that are on the spectrum, that to me it seemed absolutely the connection they had with animals was so unbelievable, and the communication with animals with no verbalization was such a connection that you couldn't say that this child and this dog were not bonded together, even though it's not their dog. And so when I heard that, I just felt like I think that's very real, and I was just wondering if there's any new information or anything you know about autistic children and psychic abilities.
Well, and there is that, I don't know if I could say the name of the blog that's going on, but called the Autism t Tapes,
Mhm.
um, or or Telepathy Tapes. I'm not sure the exact title, but it is a lot of that reporting. There's not been a lot of research, and hopefully maybe more will go on. And research with children is difficult for ethical reasons and just that, getting them to be able to cooperate and understand in a setting, a kind of a research setting, which is why Sally and I would use M&Ms with kids as a way, telepathically to see what color would come out. But way back in I'd have to say 20 years ago or more, there's a book called The God Connection, in which the person who wrote it wrote about autistic experiences that he had, exceptional experiences he had as an autistic adult, but other children on the spectrum had as well. And, it's hard to validate through research because of the limitations of communication and participation on it. But anecdotally, there's a lot of material out there. There's more than one things. Are they more so than other children, neurotypical children versus children that are on the spectrum or neuroatypical children? Hard to say because I think all children have abilities, as we discussed. Um, but because of the nature of their communication skills and their neurology, they may be very sensitive. They might be much more aware and sensitive to things around them and forced to be using other senses to pick up information, and so it puts them in that realm more. Their filters, in a sense, like you say, may
Yeah.
be less on that. I wouldn't want to generalize that all children, all people, all, children on the
Right.
spectrum have the same degree of experiences. Some may not, some may be aware, some may not. Uh, but there are anecdotal reports, yes,
I
that they
think that
have.
I think it's wonderful that they're just for them to even put that into the possibilities of what's happening for these children that they don't understand all of what's going on. So
Yeah.
I think that's a good thing to add in there. Um, Okay, let me see here. Aha, I was going to talk to you a little bit about the field of mental health. And do you find clinicians opening to hearing and accept children talking about seeing spirits or exceptional experiences? Or are they just pushing drugs on them? It seems to me, from what I'm seeing now, from when I was doing this in the late 60s, and now it seems like there are a lot of clinicians and people that are much more aware of what's going on, and that there's really been a shift and change in this. And I'm wondering if that is really true, or what have you seen in this in your field?
Well, I've been over the many years seeing kind of interesting sort of roller coaster trajectory
Mm.
where, there's periods of time where, the TV shows help, where you have Medium or, movie Ghosts or, other paranormal state that open acceptance. I think over the years, even the word ESP, psychic, are becoming normal everyday words. People don't have the same negative impact with them. Here comes
Yes,
your puppy.
yes.
Uh, so I think there's more acceptance, awareness. If our society gets a little more conservative and restrictive, you see it shut down and close down more. Again, I think because people don't want to share it, don't want to be labeled or have negative impact on it. Um, so I think um, with my website, what I saw a shift occurring is I would have, a couple of hundred emails from around the world a week asking questions, but the questions were often around seeing spirits and less about concerns about clairvoyance, about telepathy, about precognition, things that probably 50 years ago were much more, kind of questioned and wondered about and tested and looked at, are now those areas are a little more acceptable and commonplace, you
Coming into
know.
mainstream.
Yes.
And is there any of those where a child is more prone to, like, say, precognitive dreaming or seeing spirits? Is there one that you get more emails about that's more popular in kids' experiences than others?
Yeah, I think a lot more was about seeing spirits, reports of a parent saying, my child from birth was be in the crib and look up in the corner of the room and giggle and laugh. And as she got older, she would talk about orbs, seeing orbs in her room. And then now she's 6 or 7 and starting to see shapes or, or a little worried at bedtime because these things are bothering her coming in. Um, and so a lot more around seeing spirits. And I think also because of maybe the popularity of shows that like Paranormal State and things like that that were saying, hey, it's okay, these things happen, these things are there. Um, so now I'm getting a little bit about past life histories. Um, but a lot of the work had been and still is helping parents understand how to talk to children about their experiences, feel protected, if they have spirit contact, to understand, why it's at bedtime. I use the analogy with parents, the stars are in the sky all the time, but
So
during
do they ever have any children brought to you anything about, because I know that also in the mainstream media, UAP and UFO and all this is going on now. And so there's a lot of that coming through with a lot of people, and it's becoming also less scary to talk about or whatever. Do children ever bring that to you, or is that idea of, uh, uh, for better or worse, alien or ultra other dimensional being? I'm not sure what the right word is,
Yeah,
but do they ever
yeah.
bring that forth to you, or is it only pretty much spirits and deceased and
Oh,
precog?
it's a lot of the spirits and deceased relatives and friends and ghosts that are earthbound and can't cross. But I do get some reports of seeing sort of alien figures or extra sort of extraordinary uh, figures, people, sometimes angels. I've seen angels myself, but you'll have some of that. It's not as prevalent or pronounced as seeing. Usually it's because if they feel a little more threatened or frightened of
Mhm.
them. Um, but I wouldn't doubt that, there may be more coming.
Yeah, so it's good to know what the children are perceiving, the current.
Yeah.
Uh, okay, so I was going to ask just a little bit more about ghosts, and then I wanted to move into your professional career. Um, what can you share about ghosts? And do you find a lot of communication with children and ghosts giving you, like, is it are they having a particularly saying one's like a relationship with a grandmother, or are they going into houses and saying, I know there's a ghost here, or what is what has been, I love Lloyd Auerbach was the one who told me to watch the Ghost series and absolutely loved it because it really feels like it just felt like such a good way of displaying what's really maybe happening. And I'm wondering with children, do you need much explanation, or do they just find communicating with the ghost a completely comfortable and it's nothing that they have anything, they're not afraid because they see their grandma.
Yeah. If it's an entity that they're familiar with, someone that they can recognize, but most of the time it's not. It's someone that they don't know,
Uh,
and just randomly will appear. And so it does become a little frightening. For most of the kids, it's at bedtime when it's dark and they're afraid to be in the room or afraid to be in the room alone or want to check the closet or under the bed kind of thing from 5 on up, especially where
mhm.
developmentally that's normal, but also they're opening the door in a sense to these other realms. As I was starting before, I mentioned to parents, we see the stars are in the sky all the time, 24/7, but you don't see them in the daytime because the sunlight is out. You can't see the stars like you can at night. But when the sun goes down, you can see the stars. The same is true of the spirit world. They're always around us. They're there. They're contacting us. They're near us. But you don't see them. You don't necessarily feel them. But at nighttime, they become more visible. They become more able to communicate and have impact with you. So, that telling parents put a night light in the child's room so that you kind of distort, or a fish tank with a light on so that that can diffuse seeing it, telling the spirit, go away, leave me alone now. I'm studying, I'm doing my homework, I want to go to sleep. Um, Helping navigate it that way because often they don't know who these people are and why are they there and what are they trying to communicate and what an earthbound ghost is someone who hasn't crossed over. So oftentimes they want to resolve something that's unfinished and they may be trying to communicate, or they're picking up what's gone on in the environment around them, like a cemetery or a hospital where people have died and there may be earthbound spirits, ghosts there versus a relative that they want to have contact with and feel comfortable with, or a guardian angel type of thing. So helping them differentiate that, put white light around themselves, feel protected, feel empowered, that they're not going to hurt you. You can say you want them to leave. There's ways to help them cross over, all of that. So working with them on that.
Do you have any like for me, I guess I would refer to it as I babysat for a family when I was 12 years old, and now not only do I am I still in contact with the family and the child I diapered, now she has a teenager herself, and we talk on the phone about things that her teenager experiences. So our relationship started as, say, babysitting, but it's contained a close love for all these years, 50 more years, 50 years of closeness or more. Have you had any of that with any long-term, like young people, where you help them and their families, and now they're 25 years old or something, and they say to you, oh, I'm doing this now, and I found that my child seems to have some of the things like I talked to you about, and from what I learned from you, I'm able to help my children not have any difficulty like I did because what I learned from you. Did you ever get to be that long
Yes,
one?
yes, I did have a few, a handful that I cherish that I worked with. They were younger, maybe 10 or 11, started having a lot of experiences working with them through adolescence, where they were in a lot of crisis around their abilities and seeing spirits and family conflict around it, trying to navigate their own personal development as well as their psychic abilities. And and then staying in touch and in their 20s, 25, saying to me, I want to be doing what you're doing. I want to be helping other people like you're doing and going out and doing, being a medical empath or using their abilities to help people grieving, over the loss. And then saying that they're seeing some of their, now they know how to handle their child as they're starting to see some of these abilities manifest in their own child. So yeah, those are the nice, happy endings kind of thing where you know that you've made a difference and you've helped. And
Very.
those people were those teens and now young adults and married adults have, asked me to send to them other teens that need help. And they're around the world. These are not just US kids. They're
Yes.
in other countries around the world that they are happy to talk to others about their experiences and help guide them through it as well. So yeah, it's been very nice to have that.
That's a beautiful reward.
Yes. Yes.
And I'm glad you've got to have that. That's what time gives us in the length of time. Uh,
Right.
that's
Right.
why I never, you never sometimes people come in and out of your life. So until you're dead, you're not sure who's going to really be there in the live part for how long, and they come and they go.
Sure. Yes.
So where do you see your, I know you're semi-retired, but where do you see your professional career going next? And are you still in New York City area or?
No, I left New York about 6, 7 years ago and moved to Ocala, Florida, North Central
Mhm.
Florida. And it's interesting because I've always had two parallel careers of just as long in the mental health field as a child psychologist and therapist and working with kids with trauma, complex trauma, and a variety of, emotional issues and family issues, some of which overlapped with psychic experiences. And kept kind of my parapsychology and clinical parapsychology separate professionally because there were some professionals who did not like what I was doing and felt that I shouldn't be bringing that into the field. Well,
Mm.
now I'm merging the two worlds more, and serendipitously, Sean came into my life at the time that I was just saying I think the next step should be back into working with children and the clinical work and mental health professionals and writing, helping mental health professionals a lot more than I had been doing on how to work with children, be open to that in therapy, how to be sensitive, to what is said, how to respond. So I see myself writing a lot more for the clinicians. Um, Sally and I talked about updating our parapsychological research with children book because it's out of print and getting that out so people could do research and know about research with kids. Um, and really trying to get the mental health field moving forward more. There's a lot more openness, I think, of mental health professionals. I think, frankly, because many of us are back in this lifetime doing the work that we need to do, and we're opening the doors around all of this. There's a good network of mental health professionals I've created around the country that are willing to work with families and be open to their experiences. So a lot more openness in writing at this point in time. Professionally, I don't care about the negative reactions I may
That's
get,
right.
I mean, that's the privilege of age. You can be more outspoken, and it's like, I don't care.
Right, right. Your career has already been built. You're not
That's
just
right.
starting out.
Right. So certainly a lot more work in that direction and getting it out there.
That's wonderful. Uh, it, it it matters so much to the rest of us when people like you will then come forward with credentials and present these things to other clinicians and other people to educate them. And there's nothing woo-woo. This is just factual things, and you have all the documentation of all the times you've had with these children and all the work that you've done. So you don't
Yeah.
have to prove anything.
Right. Right.
So I'm just going to go over my list now and just see that if I've asked all the questions I wanted to, and then I wanted to see if there's anything else you wanted to talk about. Um, Can such and ghosts and a professional career. All right, so the last question I have is for you to share anything more about your website, perceptivechildren.org, and what people might be, who would be the person that would be interested in going to this website, and what would it provide for them?
Sure. There's lots of information, articles I've written, things that I've put up there to answer questions about various experiences, book reviews, including The God Connection. Jim Tucker's book about past life experiences. It's really there to help people find a legitimate source of information and understanding and acceptance about children, teen, and even adult exceptional experiences. I created and ran psychic experience groups for children and for adults, because many adults wanted to share their experiences as a child, but also as adults growing up and currently. So, people can reach out. We can give them my email as well. I'm welcome uh, comments or questions. Hopefully, people find it a good resource and information for themselves. I'd love, for parents to go there to get a better understanding. I have some frequently asked question sheets about how do you talk to your child, what games you could play with them, how not to put them on show, to make them perform
I
on
hated
demand, you
that.
know, all of that, to be accepting of it. And for teenagers who are struggling with some of these issues as well, it's very helpful information out there. And the Facebook page, the Perceptive Children Forum, also you have other people out there sharing their experiences. So, I welcome uh, your listeners to feel free to contact me and if they have questions or experiences they want to share.
I love the website, and I went through, I love that you had a list of questions that are common questions that people would ask before they were delving further into the subject. They could get those questions answered immediately on your site. And I thought that was wonderful. And then they can write in whatever other questions they have besides the group that you have there that are the most common asked ones, which, all around, well, how does this happen, or why is it happening, or whatever the questions are. It's just wonderful that there's a site for them to go to, especially parents that who really care about their children and aren't trying to hide what's going on, but they themselves don't really know exactly how to handle it. So to provide that place for them, to me, is a really grateful, wonderful thing. And I know both you and I wish that they had that when we were children.
Which was a good motivation for why I created it.
Yes.
Thinking back to that time, it's like, "Oh, I wish I had that as a resource."
I how much smoother things could, or just it would have been, just would have been nice to understand some of this and not have to hold it all in. So I think that's a wonderful service that
Right.
you've provided all these years. So we're at our hour now, and I'm just wondering if there's any words of wisdom or anything else that you'd like to share with our audience before we close our show.
Well, other than, we all have the ability. It's a matter of, whether you want to open the door and be able to accept it and listen and see what comes up. I encourage the listeners, record your dreams. Set your alarm clock a little bit sooner than usual so that it interrupts your dream cycle. Write down, or in the middle of the night, if you wake up, have a pad and pencil, write down your dreams, and then take a look and keep a record, see over time how much of that might have come true or has bits and pieces about future events and how accurate it was. That's a great way to start moving into your own abilities and being tuned to what information is out there that you're picking up on. And as I said before, for parents, this is a natural gift. It's a gift. It's just like being an artist, being an exceptional baseball player, or your child's a musician. You know, don't make it their total world. Let them be well-rounded, get them into other things. Don't exploit it, don't magnify it, where you put them on show and constantly are asking them, did you dream anything? Is anything going to happen? Tell me what's going to happen. Just go with the flow and treat it as a normal ability, and help them understand that it's a gift and you can see things I can't see. So tell me about it. Just
Hmm.
encourage that communication.
That's beautiful. And great, great words. Very, very important for us to remember that. And I myself never even thought to refer to it as a gift. I just thought of it as just being part of me. And now I think in my mind, oh, I've been given some sort of a gift or a talent for something, because I
Right.
can't play the piano. I can't do art, and I can't do all these other things that come so easy for other people. So I had to say what came easy for me is this kind of stuff. And
Absolutely.
I'm my own self am honoring that this exists in me and that this is all fine and it's nothing to discount.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's special talent.
It's
And
and Go
if
ahead.
if people do want to email me, I use this for these kinds of communications, I'm sorry, perceptive children. Oh, I should make sure I give you the right email, otherwise it's never
I
going to
have
get to
one
me.
here that says Psychic Children 2. Is it that
Two,
one?
yes,
So
yes,
I'll
that's
tell you, I'll read it for you. It's PSYCHICCHILDREN, the number two at gmail.com. And
yes,
all of this information will also be in the description on the YouTube and on the other sites. So we'll have all her connections there for you as well.
great, great.
Okay, so I want to thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for being with us here today. I'm just so happy to be having a podcast interview again and getting back here into 2025, and looking forward to more wonderful guests like yourself.
Thank you.
And I hope that you enjoyed being here as much as we enjoyed having you.
I did. Thank you so much for having me.
So thank you. Just hold on one second. I want to just tell our audience how much we enjoy having them listening to our shows. We want to thank them again for liking, subscribing, sharing. We have some exciting guests coming up, so we look forward to having you, and have a wonderful, wonderful week. And remember what we always say, share your stories because stories can heal. Bye bye.